Welcome to Not for Piators. I'm John Dougal. We're currently in a series on how modern society is adversely affected intrinsic masculinity and intrinsic femininity. So far we've covered financial stratification, how the distribution of wealth is skewed since the 1950s, and we've covered obesity, how Americans have put on about 40 pounds since 1960. Today we're going to look at education, specifically how men have fallen behind. I came across a January 23rd article this year in the New Yorker by Idris Calhoun. It's called, "What's the Matter with Men?" It states that in academic performance, boys are well behind girls in elementary school, high school, college, where the sex ratio is approaching 2 females for every 1 male. The first thing to note is there's nothing inherently wrong with young men intellectually. An article, Sex Differences in IQ, on the website IQComparisonSite.com, quotes a 1983 paper by A.R. Jensen and C.R. Reynolds, where the paper found that females have a mean IQ of 101.4 and where males have a slightly higher mean IQ of 103.1. In essence, there's no difference between the two sexes. 1.7 is minuscule. No one's going to observe it. Both distributions are normal distributions. The scale that I've shown here on the screen is exaggerated, but the principles are correct. The vertical scale shows percent of the population, and the horizontal scale shows IQ. The standard deviation for females is smaller, which means that more females cluster around the mean compared to males. Conversely, the curve for the males is flatter, which basically means that there's greater differences at the extremes. On the right side of the graph, there are more really bright men than really bright women. And on the left side of the graph, there are more really slow men than there are really slow women. Well, let's focus on the right side. With more really bright men at the extreme, it begs the question, why has there been a change at university where there's now notably more women attending than there are men? This seems incongruent. You'd think with the bright men with IQs above 100, we'd be going to university just like we were 40 years ago, where the numbers of men and women were the same. So there must be some sort of external societal factor that's brought about this change. Let's take a look at some data and see where the numbers lie today. The chart on the screen is for a mix of master's degrees. Women are getting net significantly more master's degrees than men are. I found this chart in an October 8th, 2021 Brookings Institute article called "The Male College Crisis is Not Just in Enrollment, but in Completion." And you can learn a lot just by staring at a chart like this. One thing is notable, and that's that there's gender differences, based on our interests. Women tend to prefer to work with people, whereas men prefer to work with things. So it's no surprise that women outnumber men in biology, health and medicine, education, public administration, and social and behavioral sciences. And it's no surprise that the men outnumber the women in business, engineering, math and computer science, and the physical and earth sciences. But net, women are better educated than men. So what does this mean when we consider the psychological needs of survival, connecting, power, freedom, and fun? If these terms are new to you, I suggest you watch the video, Your Psychological Needs. In that video, I present the 5 needs from William Glasser's work, Reality Therapy, and I'll place a link to that video at the end of this presentation. For starters, let's look at connecting, specifically dating and relationship. connecting is our need to impart care into the life of someone else, and to likewise have them impart their care into our life. In a relationship, this doesn't always have to be a balanced trade. Women look to men who are socio-economically equal to or greater than they are. They're just wired that way across all nations and cultures. It's an intrinsic trait. Higher education typically leads to higher paying jobs, and based on the educational data from a woman's perspective, that leads to higher earning women and fewer higher earning men to choose from. Well, if you just look at Tinder data, Tinder doesn't plaster diplomas across there, so the women aren't seeing that. They're just looking at how the guy carries themselves in their photos and going from there. Well, the women, they get bombarded with interest from all the men, but only about 10% of the men, get reciprocal interest. And a smaller percentage than that actually get out on the dates. Well, what does this mean? It means that the majority of all women are only interested in the same small pool of men. Women love to think that they're in the driver's seat when it comes to dating. They think that they choose, and they do choose, but it's a twist on the paradigm, because supply and demand says that the game isn't in their favor, even if they don't realize it. If you've got 30 to 40% of the top women chasing 10% of the top men, well, the top men have about a 3 or 4 to 1 advantage. So they're the ones that are choosing. And what does that mean for the women? It's that most of the women are not going to get what they want. So there's hordes of disappointed women who will never land the guy of their dreams. Some might get laid by him, but very few will land him. And the sad fact for the men is that about 80% of the men online are completely invisible. So you combine just sort of the nature of the dating apps with the nature of the university situation, and it's not boding well for the women, and it's not boding well for the men. But this channel isn't about whining. For a guy with his eyes opens, what are you going to do? For a top guy, how are you going to chart your course? How are you going to learn to find, the women of the best character who are also attractive? Or are you just going to continue on living like a kid in a candy store, stuffing yourself? So what are you going to do about that? What are you going to do to improve yourself? What are you going to do to attract a worthwhile woman? And for the women, you're intrinsically driven to chase after top men. That drive's not going to go away, but the odds of landing a top guy are not in your favor. And there's increasingly fewer and fewer top educated men, at least. So as you age, the situation gets even worse, because guys chase after younger women. That's just the nature of the game. So what's your plan to get what you want? And are you capable of getting what you want? These are questions you should ask and answer. So let's do a little mental exercise. Picture a guy who's tall, dark, and handsome. He's athletic, fit, muscular. He's got a masculine personality. He's accomplished. He's a go-getter. Makes a good living. On top of that, he's charming and he has a good social circle. Well, this guy in our picture, he's desirable, so he's dated a lot. He isn't just sitting on the sidelines. But now he's at a point where he'd like some permanence, his own little family. Well, this guy has a head on his shoulders, and he's not an idiot. And he knows from experience the difference between a great woman and a nightmare. So what does he look for? Do you have what he's looking for? Or do you just want what you want, and if you've never considered figuring out what he wants? I'll have to make a video someday of what top men typically want. Most women don't know. All they think about is what they want. And worse yet, a woman often confuses a guy's sexual criteria with what he seeks for in a relationship. They don't realize that a man has two bars, one set for the short term and the other set for the long term. And there's a huge difference between the two different rungs, the two different bars. And guys, you could look at today's world like it's horrible, or you could look at today like it's the best time ever. Life's competitive, it always has been. And today, if you put forth the effort of yesteryear, you're already miles ahead. At university, there's 2 women for every man. Everyone needs to achieve, and from Glasser, we know this falls under the category of power. We need to achieve, and we need to, let's just be blunt, men need to achieve more than women do. It's not that we're competing with women, it's that women expect us to do better. They expect us to have a better life than them. And the reason that they do that is, what's our purpose if we don't provide a benefit? What's our purpose if a woman's life is not improved when a man's in it? College is one path. In Western societies, it's a solid path, but college doesn't have to be your thing. There are solidly other options. For one, it's never been easier to start a business. I live in the Seattle area, and just like many metropolitan areas, there's a lot of people that are busy and a lot of people that make pretty decent change. And they work a lot of hours. Well, someone who can pitch in and help can do really well here. Picture a couple with a dual income and they want a nice house and they'll want it remodeled. Handyman, craftsmen, tradesmen, general contractors who can orchestrate a home remodel, they do really well here. Let's look at something else. Here's a surprising one for some of you. UPS drivers. Everybody's buying all this stuff on Amazon, somebody's got to deliver it, and your average UPS driver makes $170,000 a year driving a brown truck and hustling packages up to people's porches. Well, anyone who can provide a service to busy people that have excess cash can be successful today. There's lots of options out there, and better if you're a go-getter and you go out and get those options. If you're a man, you need to swing for the fence because you're born to win. And if you're a woman, you don't want a timid, risk-averse guy that just has the beach ball belly. He doesn't spend any time in the gym and all he does is complain about life. Pie eaters complain. Pie eaters don't plan. Pie eaters don't take action. Pie eaters just whine and they do nothing. Well, if you're a regular viewer on this channel, you want better. So what's your plan? For today's wisdom quote, we'll look to Carl Jung. You are what you do, not what you say you're going to do. So it all rests in your hands. You don't want to reach the end of your life full of remorse, having suffered from a blend of bad decisions or paralysis. You don't want to be saying, I coulda, I shoulda, I woulda. You want better. Well, I hope you've enjoyed today's topic, and I hope you're taking the steps to improve your life so that you can have the best life possible. If you've not watched the precursors to this video, there are a couple of videos that kicked off the series, the intrinsic man and the intrinsic woman, and then there's the video on your psychological needs. So ponder these things, go after it. Cheers.